All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're looking at one of the biggest puzzles in all of medicine. How do you get life-saving drugs into the most heavily guarded place in the entire body, the brain? And we're going to explore this incredible biological tool that scientists have cooked up to act like a Trojan horse.
You've probably heard the story of the Trojan horse, right? This famous line from the poet Virgil basically means, "I'm suspicious of my enemies, especially when they show up with presents." It's this timeless idea of a deceptive gift, and as you're about to see, it is the perfect way to think about a truly revolutionary medical strategy.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How do you slip past the best security guards imaginable to deliver a cure right where it needs to go? This isn't some ancient myth we're talking about. This is a very real, very modern quest. So let's start by looking at the obstacle itself.
To really get why the solution is so brilliant, you first have to appreciate the problem. And wow, is it a problem. It's an absolutely incredible piece of natural engineering. This thing is called the blood-brain barrier, and you can think of it as the most exclusive, most effective security system in the world. Its job is to let the good stuff in, like nutrients, and keep all the bad stuff out, toxins, viruses, you name it. But here's the catch. It is so good at its job that it blocks something like 98% of all potential medicines from ever getting into the brain. They just bounce right off.
So if we can't just smash our way through the gates, we need a more clever approach. We need a key, or maybe even better, a trusted insider. And that, right there, brings us to the hero of our story, the antibody.
Antibodies are basically the special forces of our immune system. They're these little Y-shaped proteins, and their entire mission is to hunt down invaders and tag them for destruction. And that classic Y shape, it's not just for looks, it is a perfect tool for the job. Let's break down how it works.
So the two arms of that Y are what we call the Fab region. This is the business end. The very tips of these arms have a unique shape that is designed to lock onto one and only one specific target, which is called an antigen. It's kind of like a molecular grappling hook, built for extreme precision.
Then you've got the base of the Y, called the FC region. Now, once those arms have grabbed onto a target, this tail part starts acting like a giant waving flag. It signals the heavy hitters of the immune system, basically screaming, "Hey, over here, come and get this thing I caught."
So our bodies are constantly making a whole mix of these antibodies to fight things off. But if you're trying to create a medicine, a mixed bag just won't cut it. You need absolute precision. What you need is an entire army of identical super soldiers.
And here's the difference. A natural immune response is what we call polyclonal. It's like having a giant keychain with 100 different keys for 100 different locks. But what scientists figured out how to create are monoclonal antibodies. And that's like having an endless supply of one single master key, perfectly designed to fit one specific lock.
And the reason this is so huge is all about consistency. With monoclonal antibodies, every single one is a perfect clone. They all hit the exact same target, they all bind with the exact same strength, and they all cause the exact same effect. Every single time. For developing a drug, that kind of predictability is an absolute game changer.
Okay, so that sounds great, but how in the world do you actually make an army of perfect clones? Well, the answer comes from a Nobel Prize-winning technique that is, frankly, just biological genius. The year was 1975, and the breakthrough was a technique called somatic cell hybridization. This completely changed the game, and it made it possible to produce enormous amounts of these super-specific monoclonal antibodies.
So let's walk through how this hybridoma factory works because it's so clever. First, you immunize a mouse so its immune system starts making the exact antibody you want. Step 2, you isolate those special antibody-making cells. But these cells don't live very long on their own. So here comes the brilliant part. Step 3, you fuse these normal cells with immortal cancer cells. Yeah, really. This creates a brand new hybridoma, a kind of supercell. You then grow them in a special culture where only these fused supercells survive, and finally, you clone them. You've just created a non-stop factory that just churns out millions of copies of your perfect master key antibody. It's amazing.
Now, there was one big problem with all this at the beginning. These first antibodies, they were 100% mouse protein, and our immune systems are really, really good at spotting anything that isn't human and attacking it. So the technology had to evolve. And you can see that evolution right here. Scientists first made chimeric antibodies, where they swapped out most of the mouse parts for human ones. Then they got even better and made humanized antibodies. Now we're talking about 95% human, with just the tiny little tips that do the grabbing still from the mouse. And now the state of the art is fully human antibodies. These come from mice that are genetically engineered to have a human immune system, so they make 100% human antibodies right from the start.
And the result of all that work is pretty clear. That word immunogenicity, it's just a fancy way of saying the risk that a patient's own body will attack the medicine. With each step in that evolution, the risk has just plummeted. With these fully human antibodies, the risk of your body rejecting it is super low, which makes them much, much safer and more effective.
And all of this brings us right back to where we started. We have this powerful, precise, and now safe biological tool. So the question is, how do we finally use it to breach that final fortress?
This is where it all comes together. This is the modern Trojan horse. Scientists can now engineer these human antibodies to do something amazing. They design one part of the antibody to grab onto a specific receptor on the blood-brain barrier itself, basically tricking the guards into thinking it's a friendly molecule they're supposed to let in. The guard then actively pulls the antibody across the barrier, carrying its hidden cargo, its therapeutic gift, right into the brain. So the big takeaway here is that we finally have a key. The gates to the brain, which have been locked for so long, are finally starting to open. And this technology has the potential to deliver treatments for some of the most devastating diseases we know, things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even brain tumors. The antibody army is at the gates, and it's being invited inside. So the question is no longer if we can get in, but what we'll be able to conquer once we do.